Before I start explaining what functional programming really is, I want you to understand that various programming paradigms exist because the inventors of these programming languages thought that this particular way may be easier for writing large computer programs. Remember, programs should be written in such a way so that they not only work correctly and are fast enough, but also they are easy to maintain and easy to think and talk about. The point being, can somebody visualize the whole system in their heads without worrying about the details? And if requirements change, and they always do, is it easy to make changes in your code without fearing that you may have broken something in the process? So some computer scientists thought that object-oriented programming is the way because it is easier to think and reason about a program in terms of objects and what behavior they exhibit. Similarly, others think that functional programming paradigm is the way to go because you can be more certain about functions, like we are certain about input and output values of functions in mathematics. And then there are other types of languages, but the general purpose programming languages may be mainly categorized into procedural, object-oriented, and functional languages. We also have hybrid languages that contain a mix of these paradigms. Alright, so now let's first understand the difference between an object-oriented language and a functional language. In case of an object-oriented language, the way to think about program design is to think in terms of objects and their interactions. For example, if we were writing a little program which calculates areas and perimeters and such for geometrical shapes, we will have various types of these shapes which contain the area and perimeter methods, and then to calculate area of a circle of certain radius, we would create an object and then find its area. But in case of functional programming languages, functions are of importance. So we are likely to have a function which calculates the area of a circle given its radius. Well, the code shown here is of course simplistic, but the purpose is more to explain the difference between these paradigms. So the way to think about programs in such languages is to think in terms of data transformation. I mean, that would be the starting step. You have some initial data and you pass it through a function and you have another data which is probably what you need, okay? And it may be a little hard to really get a feel of it, but by end of this course, you would have seen enough examples to be able to get the difference. A more difficult thing would be to understand the difference between functional paradigm and procedural programming paradigm. And I get this question many times during the classroom training sessions. After all, don't we write the same kind of code in a language like C? So how does one distinguish between the two? Here is a little C program which calculates the area of a circle, but C is a procedural language. So how is this C procedure for calculating the area of a circle different from a JavaScript function? Well, let's compare a few things. Let's look at these two statements to declare a variable. C is a statically typed language, so it must declare the type of the variable, whereas JavaScript is dynamically typed. Now, you have already seen how to write functions in JavaScript, and you may be surprised by this. We can actually hold a JavaScript function itself in a variable like this. And that is because in a functional language, there is no difference between function and data. Alright? Functions are just like objects. Whereas in a C program, we cannot hold a function in a variable. Firstly, because there is no function type for such a variable, and even if it was dynamically typed, C just doesn't treat its functions as objects. So they are more of procedures. Let's get back to our JavaScript console to understand this. Let's declare a function ABC like shown here. Now let's see what this ABC is. So let's type ABC in the console and hit enter. As you can see, JavaScript just treats it as a function object, which is the same as saying that a variable ABC holds some function. That is, we could have written the same thing as this. And here we did not give this function a name. We just wrote it as an anonymous function and stored that function in a variable. Both forms are exactly the same, and we can still invoke the ABC function like so. Another way to see that JavaScript treats function as an object is that let's add 6 to this function. And the result shows what JavaScript does with an object. That is, it takes the string representation of an object and appends it with the string representation of another object, right? You must notice that we have not called the function as yet. If we run this statement, then we are making a function call, and whatever is returned by the function is being appended with the number 6. Alright? So functions as such can also be passed around as arguments to other functions, which is what we will see next. The basic thing to remember is that data and functions are treated pretty much the same, and in fact in a pure functional programming language like Haskell, data is said to be a zero-order function. This is a little heavy, so it may take some time to settle down, which is perfectly alright. There are more details like pure functions which involve side effect free programming and stuff, but I'll not get into more detail right now. The purpose of this course is for you to have a decent background in JavaScript to be able to write good quality JavaScript code and be able to understand what would be going on behind the scenes when you use frameworks like jQuery or AngularJS.